cheer, I tell them to imagine it's the end of the fourth quarter and their favorite football team is driving down the field. And they get down and they have to score a touchdown to win. And then I tell them, imagine you're at that game, and on the last play of the game, they score that touchdown. But you know what? I don't need that today, because this gentleman doesn't need any help to get cheers. Welcome back, Patrick Switek with the Tribune and Beto O'Rourke, Democratic candidate for governor.
Beto, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure we all really appreciate it for you being here.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be with you, and it's an honor to be with all of you. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Want to ask about some specific questions, but want to just open it up also with just a big picture question. I'm sure you answer this all the time. Why are you running? And then can you tell us more specifically, what is it about your platform, your policies, your proposals that could benefit the lives of Texans with disabilities?
We have such a great opportunity as Texans right now, maybe unlike any other time over the course of my nearly 50 years in this state and on this planet. And it happens at a moment that's probably one of, if not the darkest, in our lives here in Texas. You think about the attack on democracy, especially the voting rights of those who have disabilities and their caregivers. You think about the attack on women, total abortion ban, no exception for rape, no exception for incest, in a state that has one of the highest rates of maternal mortality. Now, almost 17 weeks since those 19 children and 2 teachers were taken from us in Uvalde, and this state has not done a thing to make it any less likely that any other child will meet the same fate as those kids in that community. And then all of us, and some more than others, experienced a blackout in this state last February, in the energy capital of the world. For days, no heat, no light, no water, no power for the people of Texas, not because of God or Mother Nature, but because of those in power who could not keep the power onto us. And the reason I think that this is, despite all of that, such a great opportunity is because of the way that the people of Texas are choosing to meet this moment. We are going to come through and not only stop the extremism that defines not us, but our government and our governor today, but we're going to do the great things by and for one another. Invest in our public education, make sure that our teachers, our counselors, our librarians, our special ed educators have the support and pay that they need so they don't work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, just one, focusing on those kids in front of us, that we expand Medicaid so everyone is healthy enough and well enough to be able to rise to their full potential and promise, and ensure that each and every single one of us is treated equally under the law. That's the great promise of the United States of America. It has never been fully realized. We can lead the way right here in the state of Texas. That's what this campaign is about, and this campaign is comprised of the people of Texas. So Patrick, I am confident that not only are we doing the right thing at the right time, but that we are going to win this election on the night of November 8th.
You mentioned a host of issues I want to ask some more specifics about, including Medicaid expansion. You clearly support that. Be a little more specific. How do you think that would benefit people with disabilities, community attendants, their families? How does that help the communities I just described?
There are more than 170,000 of our fellow Texans right now who are waiting up to 19 years to be able to access the Medicaid waiver program in the state of Texas. This is unconscionable that in a state that boasts a $2 trillion gross domestic product, that has a $250 billion biannual budget, and that invented Medicaid in the first place. LBJ signed this program into law in the summer of 1965, that we won't take the deal on the table that would bring $10 billion of our federal income taxes back to Texas every single year to connect more people to better care. We could also expand that waiver program, improve it based on the suggestions, the ideas, the leadership here in this room, whether that's Rev Up, Adapt, or any individual here among us. You mentioned caregivers. The base salary in Texas is $8.10 an hour. Try living on that. You can't. That means you're working a second, a third job in order to make ends meet. It means those caregivers cannot afford caregiving for for their kids, for their parents, for their family members, raising the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, and ensuring that we have the right to organize and support labor in the state of Texas is a great way to address this issue and make sure that we get better care for everyone here. The resources, the programs, the solutions are there. All that has been lacking is leadership. We can change that on November 8th.
You mentioned caregiver pay, so I'll just go right into that topic. What would you do to raise those wages and also provide benefits or better or more benefits for those workers?
Yeah, I mentioned raising to at least $15 an hour. That's a good start, but that will not be sufficient to meet the task at hand. It means that we also have to expand healthcare and access to healthcare in Texas. The great perverse irony is that many of these caregivers literally cannot afford and do not qualify for the health care that they themselves are providing right now. We can change that through expansion and, in addition, supplemental investment right here in the state of Texas. I mentioned the right to organize. That's critically important. How do we get paid family leave? How do we make sure that they're treated with the dignity and respect that they deserve? It means that we ensure that they have the right to organize and use the power of their labor to get those better working conditions, higher wages, protect themselves and those that they serve, to improve the safety here as well. And the other thing that I want to mention, and it may sound like it's not necessarily directly connected, Patrick, but I mentioned the right to vote earlier. Nowhere is it under greater attack than in the state of Texas right now. Harder to cast your ballot, harder to register to vote here than anywhere else in the union. I mentioned it's particularly targeted at the community right here in this room, our fellow disabled Texans, but their caregivers as well. There are new sections of the criminal code that are so punitive, aimed at caregivers right now. I don't blame some for wondering whether they should try to assist their clients, the people that they are giving care to right now, in casting their ballot. That cannot be us. That cannot be our future. So in addition to everything else that I mentioned, we must ensure that we restore the right to vote to each and every eligible Texan. Same day, automatic voter registration, no barriers to entry, physical or otherwise, to cast that ballot, no fault mail-in voting like almost most other states have in the union today. We do that, and we have a healthy democracy, and we have our fellow Texans, including these caregivers and the people for whom they give care, who can vote their interests at the ballot box every election.
I was going to ask about voting rights for Texans with disabilities. You just covered that, but just, I guess, to be a little more specific, I assume you would want to roll back that elections bill that passed last year. What more can be done, I guess, more proactively, perhaps, to make sure that Texans with disabilities have the same voting rights as those without?
I was really proud of what Harris County did the last election cycle, opening up these voting super centers. Despite the governor saying that in the midst of a pandemic that killed at least 100,000 of us, that there could only be one ballot drop-off location per county, including here in Travis or there in Harris, where there are more people in that county than in the entire state of Nevada. The election administrators in Harris County opened up 24-hour voting, curbside voting, drive-up voting. For those with disabilities, this literally meant that they could have a connection to our democracy, the ability to participate in and help decide the outcome of these elections. Let's build on that. Let's make sure that we add to that online voter registration, automatic same day. And then here's an idea that I think could apply to everyone who's interested in voting and wants to make sure that we're in keeping with our Texas values. Let's replace Confederate Heroes Day as a state holiday with Election Day as a state holiday, so folks can take the day off of work and actually use that time to vote.
A few answers ago, you mentioned the 170,000 Texans with disabilities currently waiting for services. What would you do as governor to eliminate the waiting list for home and community-based services?
It's interesting. I was in a part of rural Texas. I was in Bowie in Montague County, knocking on doors, as we do everywhere that we go. We do it here in Austin. We do it in Houston, in my hometown. But we also do it in these communities that have sometimes, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, have been written off by Democrats as too rural or too red or just too tough to organize in. But My belief is everyone has value. We can learn from everyone that we want to serve. And so knocking on these doors in Bowie, a guy answers, and we have a conversation, as we always do. I ask him how things are going. He tells me that he's working at home because he is caring for his adult son who has disabilities. They just moved to Texas from Colorado. And I said, well, what is something that I could do as your next governor? And he mentioned this 18-year wait list in his case. And he said, Beto, Colorado used to have an 18-year wait list as well. It's now down to under 1 year. What they did is, after they legalized marijuana and taxed the regulated and controlled sale of that substance, they drove those revenues into this program to reduce the wait time to ensure that every single person in Colorado, including those with disabilities, have the resources to live independently, to be able to make their own decisions, as you all have told me, no decision about us without us, and to ensure that they're rising to their full potential and fulfilling their promise. He said, hey, Beto, why can't we do that here in Texas? Well, there's no reason that we can't do that here in Texas. By legalizing marijuana, by investing the proceeds into programs like these, expanding Medicaid, as we just talked about earlier, we're going to have the resources to bring those wait times down and treat our fellow Texans with the dignity and respect that they deserve.
Thank you. Another issue I'm sure comes up a lot on the campaign trail is education. I know you're a big advocate for public schools. Can you tell us your position on the concept generally of school choice, and have you considered how that could help or not help Texans with disabilities?
Public education in this state is under extraordinary attack right now. You all know this. Educators are leaving the profession by the thousands, by the tens of thousands. My 11-year-old son completed the 5th grade year without a permanent classroom teacher a single day of that academic year. God bless the subs, but not having that permanent, consistent person in that classroom means that those kids did not get the care and the attention that they needed and that they deserved. That's not the outlier. We're seeing that all over and hearing about that all over the state of Texas right now. So what are some things we could do? We could pay those educators more. They're working 2 and 3 jobs right now, especially special education educators who have a teacher-to-student ratio, sometimes 1 to 10, 1 to 20. I'm hearing 1 to 40, 1 to 50 from students who need individualized personal care and attention, who are not getting it today. And those special ed teachers who are my heroes, and I've shared this with Patrick before, my sister Erin, who has significant intellectual disabilities, was in a special education classroom all the way through her senior year in high school. They're laboring under very significant challenges right now at a time that they're under attack by their own governor in their own state, and yet they're doing their very best. Let's make sure that we have their backs and hire enough more special education educators to make sure that those kids are getting the attention that they deserve. And then there's this. We know that up until 2017, this state created this arbitrary cap that said that no school district could have more than 8.5% of their students with special education needs. How they came up with that number, I don't know. But though that's no longer the law, it still seems to functionally be the practice in our districts and classrooms. We're not getting the funding to those kids that need it right now. When you add to that this governor promises to drain our schools of public tax dollars by converting them to vouchers and sending them to private schools, you understand the crisis that we're under right now. So what's the answer to this? 1, we've got to win this election. 2, we have to up the share of the state spend for public ed. Right now it's 40% of every dollar spent to support public education. You and I, as property taxpayers and renters, pay the other 60%. We need to get that back to 50-50. We need to increase what the state is able to supplement in addition to that. Yes, special education, arts and music, those other kinds of emotional, social, and extracurricular investments that benefit every single child in every single school. I want to make sure that we have the best system of public education in the country, but today we're behind Florida, California, New York, Virginia, North Carolina, every single one of our peer states. They're eating our lunch. We've got to do better. I will make this a priority as governor.
Another issue that's very front of mind, especially after Uvalde, is gun violence. And I know that's a very important issue to you. I heard you talk about on the campaign trail. Reporters have talked to you about it at length. So I'm trying to ask it in a new way. When it comes to reducing gun violence in Texas, if you called a special session, your governor, you called a special session tomorrow, and you could only put one gun violence proposal on the agenda, what would it be? I know you've got a broad platform on this, but if you just had one that you could prioritize, tell lawmakers, get it done, I'm going to keep you here until you get it done, what would it be?
I love this question because it speaks to this moment. I mentioned tomorrow will be 17 weeks since those 19 children and 2 educators in Uvalde were taken from us. 17 weeks, and a governor who's called a special session to go after trans kids, a governor who's called a special session to go after teachers through CRT, a governor who's called not one but 2 special sessions to weaken the right to vote in the state of Texas, could not be bothered to call a special session to reduce gun violence for our kids. It's the leading cause of death for children and teenagers in Texas today. So, were I governor, I would call that special session. And to Patrick's question, here's the agenda. This is an agenda that doesn't come from me or the Democratic Party, but the people of Texas that I've listened to. Let's do 3 things to better protect the kids in those schools and the teachers who already sacrificed so much for them. 1, at a minimum, let's raise the age of purchase for an AR-15 or an AK-47 to 21. That would have purchased 3 more years for intervention in Uvalde. 2, let's have a red flag law so that if you have that firearm, but you're threatening to use it against yourself or against someone else or against those kids in those classes, we can intervene legally through due process before it's too late. That would have averted the tragedy in Uvalde. It might have prevented the 23 people being slaughtered in my hometown of El Paso. That murderer's mother called the police department in Allen, Texas, asking for help. They said, nothing we can do, no red flag law on the books, you're on your own, good luck, goodbye. What about a universal background check? In Midland, Odessa, guy walks into a gun shop, tries to buy an AR-15, is rejected because he doesn't pass the federally licensed firearms dealer's requirement to produce a background check. That's great, but because we don't have a universal background check in Texas, he's able to buy from a private seller, no questions asked, uses it against people in that community, 8 are dead. Every one of those issues, raising the age of purchase, red flag laws, universal background check, supported by Republicans, gun owners, independents, Democrats, non-gun owners alike. There's a lot we'll argue about. On this much we have common ground, so let's move forward.
And number 1, raise the age.
Yep.
Got it. Want to ask you a little about how this campaign is going, but before we transition to that, just want to give you another big picture question. Are there any additional policies, proposals that you have in your platform that you want this audience to know about that would benefit the lives of Texans with disabilities?
You know, the great promise of America, the foundational principle is that we're all created equal and that we should all be equally treated under the law. We've never arrived there, right? We've never achieved that. And we know that based on who you are, how you're born, the color of your skin, whether or not you have a disability, you're going to have a different experience with our criminal justice system, very often, all too often, with our police, with our educational system, with our healthcare system, you name it. However, I'd like to think that we will never stop trying to get there, and that Texas, of all places, could be the one that leads this nation forward in making sure that we come close or actually achieve that goal. So I want to make sure that under the law in Texas, that everyone has equal opportunity. Everyone is treated equally. Everyone can grow and live to their full potential, fulfill their promise, reveal their genius, not just to themselves and their family's benefit, but to the benefit of all of us. That's going to be my message to the people of Texas, that when everyone is able to do well, everyone in this state is then able to get ahead. It accrues to the benefit of each and every single one of us, all 30 million Texans. It begins with many of the programs and specific policies that Patrick and I have been discussing, but it also must be reflected in those who hold positions of leadership and public trust. So those who comprise my cabinet, those who will be on my staff, those who are nominated and appointed to commissions, to boards, to committees, those positions of power that determine the future, the fate, and the fortune of the state of Texas, will look like and be reflective of those who are here in this room and those who live and make the state of Texas such a great place to be in the first place.
A quick follow-up on that, and I think you just kind of addressed it, but for the issues that we discussed today that maybe you aren't fully read up on, what's your plan to learn more? Is it, like you said, having staffers who are specialized in these issues, having appointments that reflect these issues?
Absolutely. I want to think, there are too many to think, but adapt every single time we picked up the phone and called. Bob or someone on his team has answered and has guided us on an issue that he's been a leader on for decades, understands far better than I ever will. I've got a good friend who I grew up with in El Paso, went to Mesita Elementary with Lisa Flores, who has a son with special needs in the school system. She does not hesitate to pick up the phone and call me and say, hey, Beto, I listened to your comments the other day with Patrick, for example, and you missed a key point. I want to make sure that I remind you of this, and I'd love to hear you say this next time you're before an audience in the state of Texas. My best hope of being the best governor of this state is to listen to and learn from the people that I seek to serve. I do it now as a candidate, and yes, I will do it as governor. I want there to be an open channel, an open line to make sure that everyone's experience and expertise is reflected in the leadership that we provide.
Thank you. In these final several minutes here, I just want to ask about some of the headlines over the weekend. You know your opponent in this race, the Republican Governor Greg Abbott. Border is the #1 issue for him. He and Ron DeSantis have been making national waves recently for this transporting migrants from the border to Democratic-led cities around the country. At least here in, I can't speak to DeSantis, but at least here in Texas, you know this is a policy or a program that, you know, the governor here in Texas acted unilaterally to create. So if you were governor, would you act unilaterally to end it? I mean, you know, this is basically an executive-initiated program, so you would have the power to end it. Would you stop that on day one?
Yeah. Listen, it begs the question why the governor's doing this. Why he's spending time and our tax dollars sending migrants to D.C., to Chicago, to New York City, instead of being here to answer your questions and to work on these issues together to improve the 19-year wait list to get on the Medicaid waiver program, to ensure there's accountability from those who purport to serve and to represent you. It's because it serves him as a distraction. It allows him to try to make us afraid of other people, including immigrants and those who come from other countries. These are stunts that have made us no safer or more successful. In fact, I would argue after 8 years of Greg Abbott, we have more chaos, not less, at the U.S.-Mexico border. So Patrick's asking me, what do we do about this day one? We come up with solutions. And we say this, look, if you want to come to this country, we want you to follow our law. In fact, we insist upon it. But we will make sure that our laws follow our values, our needs, the reality here on the ground. If you come here to work, if you come here to join family, if you come here to seek asylum, there must be a legal, safe, orderly pathway for you to be able to do that. And I will work. In fact, I'm already listening to and talking with Republican as well as Democratic legislators about a Texas-based guest worker program. I'm going to work with our federal counterparts to raise the visa caps from those countries where the wait time is 20 years to be able to do it the right way to come to America. And I'm going to make sure that we lead to ensure that there's not a 6-year wait to adjudicate your asylum request or claim. 6 years where you may be in a refugee camp in Ciudad Juarez or Matamoros or Reynosa, when all you want to do is make sure that your kid is okay, that not only do you arrive here to benefit them, but you benefit all of us by your presence. If we take care of those who want to work, join family, seek asylum, and move them off the table, all that is left are those that are a legitimate threat to this country, those who want to traffic in illegal drugs like fentanyl or who smuggle human beings. Right now, they're needles in a haystack. We get rid of that haystack through solutions. We're better able to protect and serve our fellow Texans and secure the border in our communities. That will be my focus as governor.
Whether it's day one or later, you want to see that program end? I mean, do you think that that's bad for
the busing program?
Yeah.
Yes. I want to see real solutions that help Texans and allow us to live up to a long, proud tradition of being a state of immigrants who are made better and stronger, and I would argue safer by the presence of those immigrants.
Got it. One more question on that. You've heard some accounts that these migrants say they've been misled, maybe even coerced into getting on these buses. Do you think it's time for the federal government to investigate what's going on, whether it's what's happening in Texas or in Florida?
There needs to be accountability and there needs to be justice when it comes to how our tax dollars are being used. You know the number better than I probably, but it's now north of $4 billion that have been spent on the theatrics and the stunts at the border without producing the results that they need. I want to know how that money is being spent. I want to know what these immigrants were told before they boarded those buses. I want accountability for those who were marched onto private land so they could then be arrested by DPS troopers, taken to county jails, housed there at public expense, and then once again released into the community with no functional change to our security or safety or our ability to resolve these challenges. Accountability is the same word that I hear from those parents in Uvalde. No accountability for the 91 DPS troopers who were on the other side of an unlocked door for more than 70 minutes while those kids were bleeding, while their teachers were dying after trying to save the lives of those children for whom they'd already sacrificed so much. I want there to be accountability for why the lights went out in the energy capital of the world and the grid is still not fixed in the state of Texas, and you and I are paying higher utility bills as a result. So across the board, there's got to be accountability and justice, and we can get that on November 8th by changing who the governor of the state of Texas is.
One more question on the issues of the day. You obviously are talking a lot about abortion rights in your campaign, about the virtual ban we have on abortion in Texas under Abbott. This was fresh in my mind, so the Houston Chronicle did a story on this. How would you be able to change that legal landscape with a Republican-led legislature? How do you build the political will or coalition for that?
For me, it helps just to remember our state's role in ensuring that there was protection for the right to privacy, this constitutionally protected right to make your own very personal and sometimes very painful decisions without government interference. Jane Roe of Roe v. Wade was a Texas woman. Her two attorneys, Linda Coffey, who still lives in Dallas, Sarah Weddington, who is from Abilene, both Texas women who prevailed upon an all-male United States Supreme Court in 1973 to ensure that that protection stood the test of time, at least for half a century. So this is nothing new to the women of Texas, and I'm just as confident that as women won protection for that right 50 years ago, they will win it back in 2022, and it will not just be for Democrats or by Democrats. You reported on this, but the polling shows that 86% of our fellow Texans oppose the governor's extreme abortion ban, with no exception for rape or incest, a ban that begins at conception. 78% of Republicans oppose this ban. So if those Republican legislators want to keep their jobs and get reelected, they've got to get in line with their constituents. There is common ground on this issue as well. And I'll do everything I can, work with anyone, anytime, anywhere, to make sure that we restore protections for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own health care, and her own future. And I'm confident that we're going to be able to get that done.
Thank you very much. In these just final seconds here, anything else you'd like to share with our audience today about how your campaign is going and how your platform relates to improving the lives of Texans with disabilities?
First, Patrick, thank you for the conversation, for the great questions. To each of you for allowing me to address you again, and for everyone who's participated in this campaign. And by participated, I don't mean as a supporter, although we are grateful for the supporters. I mean those who've reached out to tell me how I can do a better job. And whether you vote for me or you vote for Greg Abbott, no me importa. What matters most is that we do best by and for each and every single one of us. And you all have been absolutely tireless and generous and gracious in doing that. So I just want to say thank you and to tell you that the line and the channel is open. It's open now while I'm a candidate. It will be open when I am your governor, and I look forward to working with you and fighting for you. Thank you for having me out here today. Le agradezco. Gracias.